Hello, welcome to Building SaaS with Python and Django. My name's Matt Lehman, and this is a stream all about, well, exactly what it sounds like, building a software as a service using the Python programming language and the Django web framework. We're going to continue on the app that I'm normally building on this stream, and yeah, we'll get to it. Sorry for the delay. I had an update on my computer that just bounced me out, so if you're catching this a little later, or if you're jumping on a little later, sorry, this is not more timely. I should be better about that and check right before or earlier than just before I'm supposed to start streaming to make sure that my computer is in the working order that it needs to be. So this evening we're going to continue on this project of a homeschool checklist that is for this homeschool app that I've got. And so let's start up the server so I can illustrate where we are, and then we will get to work. And while that's booting up, I will fire up the issue itself so we have that as our reference point. If you want to ask me anything, you're welcome to do so. You can ask me anything about Python, Django, or web development. That's what I'm here for. Let me jot a note in case somebody comes in a little later about Python, Django, or web development. And I just want to say thank you to those that are able to support me with Patreon. I have an account at patreon.com/mblehman. So if the content that you find here is valuable enough that you want to be able to join that group, and I would be super grateful. And I'm grateful for Rupert, Andrew, Dragos, Ryan, Patrick, Eric, Fred, Aaron, Philip, Miguel, Shivan, and Monty, who are all able to contribute. Thank you so much. It's helped me get some equipment, and I do take the money that people send my way, and it doesn't just go right in my pocket. Sometimes I do try and take my family out for dinner or something, but I try and invest most of it back into the stream. So I've got a new box here. I intended to have a cool setup this week where I'd have a second monitor so I could actually watch your chats over here. But you know, I blew all the budget on the computer, and the monitor that I was planning to plug in, which I'm literally tapping over here, is from 2002. It's my old college computer monitor, and it's not compatible with my Mac. So my plans were foiled. I'll have to wait until I have enough contributions up to buy an actual modern second monitor that will work with my operating system. Hey Clayton, welcome. We're just getting started, so glad you're here. If you have any questions, let me know. All right, let's take a look at where we are at. So the web server is running. We've got let's go to port 5000. I'll be grateful when there's enough history on this computer so that I don't get like 50 Shades of Grey as the thing to search for when I'm going to port 5000. That's like, that's nonsense, Facebook or Firefox. What are you doing? Anyway, let's look at the app. Here's the teacher checklist. And we were as far as this little dialogue. Okay. Thanks for trying to join in, John. I hope to have this stream done, and we'll move on to some other content. The sneak peek of what's ahead. I saw something that Adam Johnson, who's a very big, prolific Django contributor, mentioned, and it's this Flake 8 bugbear. And it sounds like an extra quality controls, extra Flake 8 checks that I'm keen on trying out. So if I don't know that we'll get that far this evening, but my next stream would hopefully be the integration of that particular tool and see what it shows. That's what's on the horizon. But thanks for trying to tune in tonight, even if you're not able to indefinitely. All right, the checklist. So we've got our checklist. We designed the UI to an appropriate level, that these toggles are clickable wherever you are. You don't have to click the checkbox. I did point out that we're going to, piano and piano are the same course for both of these students in this example. And in order to have this be excluded on the list, the user would have to do this. So we will not be dealing with this particular problem in the current setup, and I'm going to wait until some user says, "Hey, this is a big issue." I don't think it will be though. So we're going to solve the majority case for this particular problem, and That's the plan. So I realized that just resized my window, cutting off the bottom. So here we are, and we need to get into the code itself and start looking at what was left. So I think this is in the teacher's view is the place to pick up. And there were a couple things that we have to do. Part of this checklist, so we're getting some information here. There's a bunch of like refactoring work. You can look at these two views and see that there's a lot of stuff that's repeated between them. We're going to spend maybe some time at the end thinking, can we clean that up? Is that worth doing? It may not be, because some of the data is used. Yeah, we'll just see. It may not be worth it, but we can consider it. And then I left myself this to-do here that we need to do some extra filtering or some extra data lookups to decide what gets set and what is not set. And then the edit checklist. Oh man, is that not a file? Files. Edit checklist. I haven't put it. My fuzzy finder only works on source control files. So occasionally I'll have a file that is not in source control yet, and yeah, it doesn't like that. So we have this template here, and there's parts that are still missing on it. The parts are what? Jeffrey, am I live every Wednesday? I try to be live most Wednesdays, and I mentioned this last week. I also run my local Python meetup here in Frederick, Maryland, where I live, and it happens to run on a Wednesday night, and we keep to that schedule. So I created a conflict for myself by picking Wednesday as my streaming night, and it also happens to be my my meeting night. So sometimes I will not be here, but I probably average, I would say, 3 streams a month or so. I do my best to try and be consistent. John, looking at your question, does your app handle students that take some courses along with their base courses in which some are a grade level above? Well, I guess that's up to the family who does it. So there's a lot of flexibility that I've built into the application, and you know, it's really up to the family to say, what am I going to add to this grade level this year? So the advantage of being a homeschool family, I guess, is that most families don't have a lot of kids in the same grade. I mean, I suppose you can have twins or triplets in your family, but most kids are in an average family, I'd say, spread apart, just for biological reasons, right? And thanks for the subscription, whoever that was. I'm still getting used to alerts. So if somebody's in an AP course that is above their grade level, I think a typical homeschool family would just add it to that grade level, not treating it any differently. So there's no data modeling in there that will try and like differentiate. Like there's definitely a modeling concept that says a student can only be in a single grade level in my app and for a given school year. The school year is like a continuous chunk of time. You can't have multiple school years running in parallel. That's a constraint I put on there. And then within the school year, there's only like one student can be in one grade level, not multiple grade levels. The flexibility in my system that I've added is when it comes down to courses, because as in this example here, there are courses that both of my kids, which are the names that I use on this test data, my son is a couple of years older than my daughter, but they're both doing piano. So it makes sense. They go to piano lessons on the same day. It makes sense for my spouse to treat that as a singular thing. So there are examples like that of art and extracurricular activities that can be shared across grade levels and have the same material. So that's how I currently have it modeled. I don't have any special like oh, this is an advanced thing, so this would be in a different grade level, so we're going to attach it to a different grade level. That's not really how I designed it. But good question. Oh, state requirement. Yeah, I don't know. I've not had any particular complaints or inquiries about different requirements for government stuff. That's an interesting question. I never thought about how that might affect different apps or different families. Okay, cool. Let's get back to this. I actually got to reorient myself. I think the fact that my machine auto updated on me and I'm a little late means that I'm not quite mentally in the right headspace for what is actually the stuff that we need to update. So let me stare at this template for a moment, get myself in order, and then we'll get to it. Looks like I've got the logic for what should be checked or not. And so I think what this to-do is saying is, what is it saying? It is, where is checklist coming from? Checklist is the whole, sorry y'all, I'm fumbling. Checklist, where are you? Checklist is the item, right? Oh, we haven't even put that in there. Wow. So I'm really far behind. So we have to put a checklist in the context, which we haven't done yet, which is why. So if there's no checklist, all right, and now it's coming back to me. Apologize. My brain's on straight. Remember, or if you're joining us joining me for the first time, there's this checklist model that goes along with these views. But the way I have done this is because of where this is in the app, the user, I don't want to automatically create a checklist for every single school year automatically. It's overkill for what is required, and it is a feature that not every family will use. Furthermore, the purpose of the checklist model that I have in the system, as you can see over here, is not for tracking what to check, but it's actually for tracking what to exclude. So in the default scenario for this view, this teacher checklist view, we want to show all of the courses. And it's only if they come in here and edit it and actually have some state that we care about representing, that's when we want to exclude stuff. So my attitude, my stance on this page was make this particular page work without a checklist object, because most of the time it doesn't need it. So that's why we have this if checklist guard inside of this this form template, like to show whether or not that's checked. And if there's no checklist object yet, we just have to assume that it's checked. That's what's happening here. That's what this else block is. So it's only when there is a checklist that we actually need to show whether it's checked or not based on this. But we don't have, back in our view, we don't have that checklist set yet. So the view needs to pull a checklist object if it exists for this school year. And then if it does so, then put that into the context and it will make more appropriate decisions here. So that's the bit that's here. Let's go ahead and do that. I don't think this is a complicated thing. We might want to make it a method. So I've started to adopt a philosophy more where, and this might have been encouraged by, I formerly worked with James Bennett. He worked at Dr. On Demand where I worked, and James is a well-known Django contributor. He's been on the technical board, and he's currently on the security team. Like, he's just been working on Django for a long time. And one of the bits of advice that James offered was to try to treat model attribute state as private data as much as you can. So if we have data here, like, his advice was basically expose an interface on your model so that you're interacting with the model through that interface and not through direct attribute access. And the principle behind it is, the encapsulation and if that's not a word or term you've heard, but let's toss it over here in the chat. So encapsulation is the idea that you want to enclose the state of whatever it is you're dealing with so that you're free to modify that state as you see fit. So if I have these attributes of school year and excluded course, we don't want something coming along and directly setting that attribute because it takes away the freedom of the author of this particular model, this particular piece of state, from modifying that, because now these attributes are basically public API. So where you can, the recommendation from James, which I think makes a lot of sense, is to add methods that describe the interface that you care about. And in this circumstance, what is the interface that I want for that view? That view needs to get a checklist, and it needs to get it from a given school year. Yeah, exactly, Jeffrey. It lets you have your confidence that the business rules are protected. That's a perfect distillation of my comment. So we've got the school year here, potentially, and I think, let me hover over this for a minute. Hopefully my type, there we go. So this can even come back as none. So we'll have to be careful with this when we're creating a method. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new class method, and the class method is going to be little more than a wrapper around the filter query, the query set operation for filters. So let me just go ahead and put it in. Where do I want to put it? So let's drop it after this filter method. Sure. Maybe I'll change the order later, but it's going to be a class method because we're not going to have the instance yet. We're using the class, the checklist class as our way to do this. Now, here's where there could be debate about where you could put this. You can attach this directly to the model like I'm about to do. There is an equally valid argument to say, well, actually, for anything that's managing the instances of a class, we have a manager, a Django manager that is attached to these things, and that's usually the model name .objects that's the manager, is that objects attribute. So there is an argument to say you should add methods to the manager instead of the model. I do not feel that strongly about that, where to put that in particular. So I'm going to opt to put it here on the class directly. Though, I don't fault anybody who says I want to put it on the manager. And I think sometimes I might even put it on the manager. I'm not internally consistent on where to put it. Okay, so what do we want? I want to make a checklist class method that fetches a checklist if it exists given a school year. So the input is a school year. So I'll say checklist, because I'm trying to think about how I would invoke this. So I would call this maybe for school year. And this is a class method, so class has to be the first argument. And school year is the next thing that we're expecting. Now up here I noted that this school year can be none. So I'm going to put a type check on it to keep me honest. And it's going to be school year or none. And then what we're going to get back is the checklist or none, because remember there may be nothing that comes back from the database table, because there might not be a checklist that goes with that school year. So we've got that, and we'll give it a docstring, get the checklist for the school year if it exists. And let's see. All right, so notice it's complaining that checklist, it says undefined name checklist. So this is immediately telling me something that I must be missing from the top of my file. And the thing that I'm missing is the ability to use the more modern annotation type annotation syntax. And so the way we get that is we go to the top of the file and we say from future import annotations. And that'll make that error go away. So what did that do? With the current annotation system in some older versions of Python, the way the annotations were implemented was against the actual, what's the term? To the actual token. So like when the class is defined, the token checklist, the class name itself, is not fully fleshed out until it has gone through all of the definitions of the class to populate that class with the methods that are going to be part of it. So as it's going through this processing, when it hits this line, when Python, the interpreter, hits this line, it has not processed this method yet. So because it hasn't processed it yet, it means that the checklist class doesn't truly exist at the time, which is why I was saying it's an undefined name. The way that you would have solved that without that thing that I just added at the top is by surrounding that with quotes. And what that would have effectively done is delayed the evaluation of that type annotation until after the class was defined. And then the type checkers could look up and say, oh, this was a string here. Let me check the value and see if there's a token that matches, in which case there would have been, because at that point the class checklist would have been defined. But the type annotations, the future annotations thing that you see at the top, kind of implicitly does this, so that when you're seeing what looks like a token here, it's sort of under the covers, Python's sort of treating it like a string at this point in time, and it's giving you just a cleaner syntax. Another thing, I'm sure there's more that the future annotations does, but another thing that it does is it opens up this pipe syntax. So without that type annotations, the thing that you'd have to do to say that something could be none is to say optional, and you get that from the typing module, optional checklist. That is one way to do it. But we don't want to do that way. This is the nicer style that avoids the typing checklist. I'm in the way of the... Oh, no! Shoot! All right. Thanks, Ewan. New setup, y'all. Sorry. How am I going to do this? Let me... That's a bummer. So I've been typing or talking, and you can't see what the heck I'm talking about. Well, now I feel silly. Let's try... Can I rotate this? Nope. I'm sure I can. What's the combination? There. I rotated it so you can see this. I gotta clearly work on this setup. Something is... I tried to give you more screen real estate, but there's a dilemma here where I need to either make my video smaller or be aware that I have somehow I need to mark to myself I've got like this gray zone that is just dead space for y'all. Okay, appreciate that, Shivan. All right, let's chat through. Hopefully what I was describing makes sense. So you've got checklist or none. This could be in quotes. I realize everything I said was hidden behind my video. So this is a way that you could have done it without that type annotation thing, but you wouldn't have been able to do the pipe none stuff here. So you would have done optional checklist. And I guess because it's for the class, you would have had to do it like this with the quoting the checklist as a string itself. So that was an old way to do it. Another way to do it would be you could optional is really another way to say this. It's the union type of checklist or none. You can do one or the other. So those are all equivalent representations of the same thing. You've been playing, yeah. So I also played around with Fast API. That was actually the theme of the last meetup that I ran. I was with a group, I had a good turnout, and we all just kind of went through the Fast API tutorial. And it's super cool. There's a lot of cool stuff that's in Fast API that does a ton for you. But yeah, Django does do a lot for you. It's when you scratch below that surface of what happens when I need to deal with users and forms and databases, and like you suddenly start to realize, wait a minute, Django's made decisions on all these things, and I like to not have to make decisions. Okay, so we've got our class method here, and what we're going to do is call class. Yeah, okay. We can do class objects filter, and we do school year equal school year. And again, we're going to test all these things later. I've really been banging on this whole feature without testing anything, which is kind of bad to a degree, but I'm going out. So what I'm not going to do is commit this all to my project with untested like that. That is a strict no-no for me, because my project is just me. So I need to have confidence that I can change anything and make sure it works. I also, with my test suite, will have a failing test build because I enforce 100% code coverage on everything. So there's a lot of code right now that is in this thing that is not tested at all. And so I'm missing huge chunks. So we'd have to get to that, but I want to like get the feature working, because I feel like it's I don't know, it's just more fun to see that way, and then we can kind of come back and backfill. Okay, so this should do everything I want it to do. And I think it will even handle the case. So imagine if none was passed in as an argument here. A filter on school year equals school year, and give me the first one. It's not going to matter. This is going to return none no matter what. And the reason is because this school year attribute is not nullable. So that means you can't have a checklist that is missing a school year. So this still would be happy to resolve. It's going to say, okay, you passed in a none as the school year, so the first on that. It might do an SQL query where it's passing in null, but it's not going to get an answer back. So it's going to return none no matter what in that case. So I'm pretty confident that that's going to work the way we want. Okay, so we need the checklist. And the checklist, so the checklist needs to go here. Well, it doesn't need to go here. Let me think about this. Do I care? Am I going to use it for anything? I could probably just put it right in the context. I'm not going to use it as part of this data collection. I think we're going to do that filtering like here in the template, and we've already kind of done it, although I haven't confirmed that that works the way we want it to. So, all right, so I'm convincing myself that this actually goes here in the context directly. And yeah, you all can still see that. I'm going to be thinking about that the whole time, Shivan. Checklist. So now we say checklist dot for school year, and we pass in the school year object. And I save that. And black will make it so you can kind of see that line. So this answers, I think, this to-do here of how will the checklist be set. We get the checklist. We put that in the context, and then within this loop, it's going to decide what's checked and unchecked, because it's going to check is the ID in that excluded courses list, which we're going to visually check this later once we actually are saving some stuff. But I think that's far enough for this. Okay. Now, what was next? So we're done with the model. We've got our new class method that's getting our checklist out. That's all super. I think we're at the form, which had a bunch of to-dos that wasn't actually done. So all that the form has in it right now is the save method, and I don't think we need the template. So why don't we keep the views file open over here so you can see that. Actually, it's going to be, I can know for certain that you can see stuff if I'm working in this editor over here. So we'll do that. So the form itself, we're going to get a form post. That's going to be part of the data passed in the form object. It is passed in right here, and it's going to enter a form as, I believe the attribute is called data. Am I being truthful there? Checklist form was showing me all the attributes. Let's see it again. Oh, there's so many. Yikes. Those are all keyword arguments. I don't know. It's the first one. I'm pretty positive that it's the form. It's an element named data. But since I don't remember enough and I don't want to deceive you all, let's go check it out in the Django docs. Okay, we've got forms, blah, blah, blah. There's how it's defined. There's an example of what a standard form method looks like, which should look pretty similar to my view, which is over here. It's get a form, and if it's a post, do something. If it's not, do something else. And then we need to see it passes in request post as the first argument. Where's the form class? Come on. I like the Django docs, but sometimes it's hard to see. Sometimes you just need to look at the code. Like, documentation's not good enough. So we're going to go get the code. I don't think I have it right now, but I want to look at it. Yep, we got nothing. So let's go to GitHub and Django. And I would encourage you, if you've never tried stuff like this, just do it. It's fun. It will surprise you how much you will learn if you do these kinds of things, where you just go and get the code to an open source project and be willing to dig into it. And now I happen to know this one decently at this point. It's a big project, so even for me, it's like, whoa, there's a lot of stuff in here. But get a good editor where you can do fuzzy finding and you can do fast searching through a repository, and you can learn a lot. This might take a second here. This repository has quite a history, so looks like I'm downloading a huge chunk of stuff. But once we have this, we'll have it and be able to scan through it. So over here, now I want to open this up, and we want to go to Django Forms. And there should be a class called a form. Of course, it derives from a base form. So let's go to the base form class. And yeah, all right, cool. That is what I thought. So in the form classes, which we're deriving from form, which are deriving from base form, the first argument when it goes into construction is a data attribute, which is what will be available to us when we're actually like working with the save method. We'll be able to do self.data when we're checking on stuff. Now, another thing to note, there's an implicit contract here that is not required, but is just kind of it's in all the examples, and I think that the documentation might even document it this way. There's sort of this expectation. Let me see. Yeah, save. See, save is not even in here. This whole forms API thing, save is not a thing. This is purely convention. But a common convention that I've seen over and over, and I'm not sure why it's not documented because it seems so common, is to have an is valid followed by a save pair. And that's what we see on the view here, is like we're calling form is valid right here. And then if the form is valid, then we're delegating to the form to do the actual work. So like you don't want, it's a way to take the work out of the view and unburden the view from doing the business logic that needs to happen. So the form is the thing that's captured all this data anyway. And so when you call save on it, you're basically saying, all right, now do, or the form data was valid, go do whatever you're going to do with it inside of that save method. And that's the convention I've seen over and over again. And because of that convention, it's basically implied that when save is called, it is only in that case when isValid was true. And when isValid is true, we know for a fact that we have cleaned data available to us, this dictionary that is attached to the form. So I don't know that we're actually going to be working with data. Yeah, we'll see. Because I don't think I need to define a clean method, so I don't remember actually what happens with clean data. But when you're working with a lot of forms, this is kind of the pattern that gets applied. So what I want to do with this particular problem space is we know that we have a school year, and we know that the data that is going to be coming from the form is all of these attributes that we defined in a previous session. They're going to be of this format of course dash and then a course ID. So we can iterate through the post data looking for anything that starts with course, course dash, and pull out the IDs. And that can be our list. And then we can filter that list taking the combination of the school year and the course. We can get the actual course objects so that we're not allowing people to just pump in junk and change any courses that they want to. It's only the overlap, the union, the intersection between the courses that are in a school year versus the courses that somebody submitted. And the reason for this, the reason to actually do this check, is to make sure that you should never really trust the data that's coming from the browser. You should do something to validate it, that it's in order to make sure that it's safe and that you're doing the right access on it. This is just like a security principle that will help you not write code that gets your stuff exploited by somebody who's being particularly clever. It's hard to always think this way, but it's the right way to think about stuff. So I think what we want to do is this is being called. So I think for the moment, I just want to see what we see. So we should be able to do a print on the data attribute of the form. And again, that should be the request post at this point. So it should be pretty raw in terms of what we see, but I still want to see it. So we're going to go to the edit page. Oops, stop the server. Or I did something. Oh, I messed up some stuff. Okay. Made some syntax errors and it didn't like the restart. Gunicorn didn't. So now it should be working. So let's reload this page. We're going to pass along all of those things. We're not going to filter anything. We hit save and it takes us back to this page. So it tells me it went into that edit view. It had a post request and it did the redirect, which is all expected stuff. And so you can see what's in here. It's our middleware token, which is for security reasons, and then all of the courses that were in that list. One of them, notice, is a multi-dict thing. Now, we are going to take advantage of the fact that we know that these are checkboxes, and we know that this is basically saying anything that is a key in here are the things we want to include in the form. If there's anything missing, that's what we want to exclude. So the set logic is all the school year courses minus all the stuff that we want to see gives us the things to exclude, right? And that's the way we're going to calculate this. And then we're going to take that excluded set at that point and then stuff those IDs into a checklist object and create one if it doesn't exist. That's how this is going to work. All right, so over here, we need a few things. We need let's say all courses, or we don't even need to work with all the course objects themselves. We only care about their IDs. So I'll call this, rather than using the term all, because I'm going to have, you'll see in a minute. So we'll say course IDs. And this is where we need to get all the courses. Try and remember, I already looked through the course and saw that it didn't really have a method, right? Pretty sure it did not. I'll go back and double check. I don't think the school year had one either. Yeah, no. Okay, so how do we get... This might be another area where we want to avoid doing a lot of extra access in the save and create another method to work with. And I think what I want, the school year is a more commonly used model, which means that the temptation is to put more methods on it. So I think what I want to do is use the lesser used model and add the method there. It's a technique that I've found to distribute your method load. This is a temptation, and I face this temptation regularly, is that you're going to have some model that's super common in your system. For me, it's a school year. That's a regular thing. For a lot of apps, it's just the user model. And the temptation is to stack methods and methods and methods on that user model. And you're left with a mess. There's no other way to say it. You're left with this mess that is a model that is incomprehensible with its number of methods. It can easily get dozens or hundreds of methods if your app is big enough. So if you take a strategy of, if you get to this decision point where you have two models that have to interact with each other and one of them needs to hold the method, which is exactly this case here. I could either add it to the school year or I could add it to the course. Then try to pick the one that has fewer methods, and you're going to distribute that load. Ahmed, welcome. We're chatting through a checklist feature, and I'm designing some methods on a model. If you've not joined me before, you're welcome to ask me anything about Python, Django, or web development. That's what we're all about here. Okay, so let's add this method to the course. And so what I want to say is, This is it's going to be another class method. I don't think I have any class methods on this one yet. And I still don't have a good rule of thumb of where should class methods go, but maybe they go above all of the actual methods because it's kind of things you do as a collection. I don't know. I can convince myself of otherwise, but a lot of these things have never been 100% consistent in my life, because there's arguments for one way or the other. So we're going to say from school year, and I want to ideally return all of the courses. And the best scenario would be if I could return that as a query set. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that for reasons we'll see in a second. Yeah, one second as I think through this. Well, let's at least get this started. So we know we're going to get a school year. I'm pausing here because I'm thinking about a behavior change I might want to make. And that, yeah, I think I see something I want to do. Earlier, we made that change to the checklist model that allowed school year or none. And the reason I did that is because I said down here that this thing can come back as none. But in this context, a person should only ever get to this page. Let me think through this. Can they get to this page when there's no school year? So an empty schedules list. Because if I can make a decision here, I can simplify this. Because think about this method. I'm anticipating putting school year right here, and I could do this. It should be class. Oh, enjoy your camping trip, John. Have a great night. I could do this and say or none, like I did with that other scenario. But propagating none in your API leads to challenges. It means that anytime you have that, you're going to have to deal with that case. And so I could make this code do that, and then I could just say, if I had this, well, let me finish this off for a moment. So we're going to need, this is going to be a query set of courses. It's going to be something like that. So we could always do if school year is none, then return course objects none. So that would work. And what this effectively says is you're not going to get anything, like it will look like a query set of courses, but it's always going to be an empty list. This kind of coding, while it works, is like, this is a case I don't really want to have to consider. It's annoying. It's annoying because the only case this is going to come up is if like this save method got called with no, and received a none as the school year. So I was wondering, like, can I change this view so that if this school year is none, it returns a 404? Like, is that going to be acceptable? But I think there is a way to reach the edit page where that would be acceptable. No, it's not. This is, okay, I got it. I like it. So I'm going to simplify this. Simplify, not here. This will actually be a little bit more complicated, but I'm going to simplify these methods that I just created. And my thinking is this edit page, you're not going to be able to reach it if there's not a week running for that school, because that checklist, that teacher checklist button that we were seeing is only available when it's able to render for the week. If the week is empty and it's not part of a running school year, they see an empty page that says nothing to do this week. So that means that anybody who has come to this page and done it for something that's outside of the boundaries of a school year means that they got here through either URL manipulation or they did something they shouldn't have done. So what I want to do is I want to say if school year is none, then return a HTTP 404 response. I think is just like that. I think that's one of the response types. Oh, shoot. 404. We'd be better off. I think that might have been actually an exception. So we want the response not found. Response not found. So that's going to be a guard clause that we add to the view, which now means that everything beyond this point is guaranteed to have an actual school year object. And then MyPy knows that as well because it can see, oh, you're doing a check for is none. So this allows us to, in this method, say, no, you must have a real school year object. And then we can get rid of this, this guard clause here, which keeps the code simpler. Like those are test cases. Those are lines of code that I don't have to check for because nothing will expect that. So that can change. The other thing that we can change is the checklist model, which is in the Teachers app. We can should be able to drop right here and make this like this. So you're only going to get that far if there's a school year. Okay, I like how that turned out, which simplifies stuff appropriately. Now, next. I don't know if we'll actually be able to return just a query set or not. We'll see in a moment. I think there might be, no, we can do that. The challenge is that this grade levels thing is a many-to-many field. So it's actually like a two-step process anytime we want to get the courses, which is annoying, but that's what it has to be. So from a school year, we can get grade levels. And again, this might be another one where we need yet another method. So I'm kind of fleshing out methods that I probably should have made a long time ago, but I didn't necessarily have. So we'll check it out in 1 second. Let me just write it out without the method so you can see what I'm doing, and then we can finish it off and flesh out the rest of the way. So Ahmed, I will get to your question in just a moment. I see it though, so don't let me forget. So we're gonna do. We can get through the. How do we get to the manager on the grade levels? We could say class. This might be the right way to go. Grade levels. Through. I might be overcomplicating this. So the grade level is a specific model, and what I'm trying to do is get to that model through this particular course class, but I might be vastly overthinking this. Through, I think it's something like this. So I'm going to try it, and then if I hate it, we'll fix it. I think I already hate it. I hate it because I want to get this a little cleaner by having a method on the grade levels as well. So we're going to do the same. We're going to assume that there's going to be ultimately another method called from school year on the grade level as well, and that would give us all of the grade levels. Let me pause and let me answer Ahmed's question while my brain digests what's going on here. And I'm sorry this is a little confusing, and this is my own fault with the modeling. So Ahmed, your question is about function-based views versus generic class-based views. I have actually probably recently switched my opinion on this topic. There was a time period where I was a big fan of class-based views. And if you look through, you go back through the history of this, you'll see a lot more class-based views. What became apparent to me through some various posts that I read and just my own personal experiences with it is that class-based views, when serving a specific purpose, like if you know that you need a detail view or one of these generic form views, those are pretty good cases to use them. But if you have anything beyond that limited scope, the class-based views I have found just end up becoming more confusing than they're worth. Whereas with some of these form-based views, they might seem a little longer at first, but the logic is all there and it's direct. There's no guesswork about it. There's no indirection. There's no, well, this method called this one, and I had to know that this one calls this one, and this one calls that one, and all of that maze. Like, eventually, like I'm sure you and I and many others can load that kind of information into our brain and capture that web of intersecting calls with each other, but it's challenging. And if you can avoid that and go straight to like, here's the line of code. Okay, I do have to do a branch for this condition because it's a form view. And so I have a couple of extra branches in there, but I at least see it all in one place and have, 30 lines of code that is like straight in a line. I think that's just conceptually or mentally easier to handle over the long term. So that's why I have taken a preference towards function-based views over time. Hey, Quatley, welcome. Good to see you, or good to see your handle. All right, getting back to this grade level thing for a moment. So I think what we want to do, and I'm going to query it directly right now, is this. We're going to do objects. The grade level is what is actually connected to the school year. So the modeling of my app is school years. School is at the very top, which we don't really interact with much, except that that's how the user is connected. School has many school years. The school year has many grade levels, and then the grade levels have many courses. But because of what I talked about earlier about like grade levels can own multiple courses, that led to this many-to-many field thing, it means that we can't directly go from school year to course. We have to go through this intermediate stage of like getting the grade levels and then filtering on courses through the grade levels and doing a distinct. It's just the side effect of many-to-many. You can avoid many-to-many relationships, do it, because they're a pain. But sometimes your customer needs will require it. So we're going to have the grade levels here. And then let's assume that we make that a method. Maybe I won't. I mean, it is not super hard. I don't always have to follow my rule of thumb. And then we want to get the courses. So this is going to be class.objects filter. And now we want to say grade levels in grade levels. Now here's the part where we got to do something a little bit more clever here. We have to say distinct. And that deals with the fact that, again, coming back to this checklist that we've been paying attention to, you can have piano and piano. And if I didn't do this distinct call right here, you can imagine this with the data that we have. So this is like 4th grade and 2nd grade. This is the sample of the data that we're working with. We want all of the course objects for that. So we get the school year has in it 4th grade and 2nd grade. And then we're saying, okay, I've got 4th grade and 2nd grade objects. Give me all of the courses that are in 4th grade and all of the courses that are in 2nd grade. Boom, join them, put them together into a big list. The problem with that, where that fails, is piano is in both the 4th grade list and the 2nd grade list. So the distinct call says, all right, now go through that list and make sure I'm only getting one of each instance. That's what that's doing. So we have to add that, or else we'll get duplicate data, which wouldn't really affect us in this checklist. It'd be fine, but it's not what we want. So there's some nice benefits to come out of this. We get a query set here, and that's a good thing, which I'll get into in a moment. Let's finish off this type signature, make sure this works. We got a bunch of like imports. I've left stuff broken everywhere. So it's time to pop the stack and like clean up all this garbage I've created. So we want from the schools app, we want to bring in the school year. We want to bring it so that this syntax of a query set is a container. This is something that I think MyPy understands. And this is a course is the thing that we're trying to go from. But as I noted earlier, course is not defined yet. So we need to come to the top and we need to say from future import annotations. That will fix the course part of that problem. We still don't have the query set. And I never remember where query set is. So let's go look for it quickly. We've got our clone of Django over here, and I'm going to search for class query set. It is in Django DB models query, but I don't think I ever import it that way. It must be in the init as well. So Django DB models query. Yeah, there it is. So coming back up here, I've already got Django DB models right here. So let's go back to that query set and say models dot. So that fixes that. And then down here, we need to import the right response type. So this is HTTP response not found. That should fix that. Now, I'm going to leave a to-do here. Make this a class method. Make this filter call a class method. We'll think about that later. At this stage, we should have the ability to ask the course model. So we can say course from school year, self school year. And that is going to give us that list of courses. So it's still not quite right for what this variable is indicating, but we're getting closer. So from homeschool dot courses models import course. And this at this point is still a query set. And here's why that's good. Because it's still a query set, we still have all of the power of the ORM available to us. So I think we haven't evaluated this yet, but we can. So we can say values list. That's a method that's on the query set. And what we actually want is a list of IDs, right? So we're going to say ID, and then we're going to say flat equal true. All right. Now, you have never seen that before. You're like, what is that? So the values list function says, hey, sometimes you don't need to bring all of these course objects into memory. You really only care about a small segment of data. In this case, and very commonly, we just care about the ID of this set of courses. So you could say values list of ID. What is that going to give back? It will give back a list, but within that list would be a dictionary that says ID and then whatever the ID is. So if you add the flat equals true, because you're only getting back one attribute, then you can get back a raw set of whatever that one attribute was. And so it has flattened the data. It's taken out those dictionaries and just gives you the values that you care about. So we should be left when, and we can actually test this out. Let's, why don't we? Just so since we're not doing any unit tests right now, we're going to continue with the print debugging style. So we're going to print out the course IDs, and it should be all of the course IDs for this school year. Now this school year is very small, so we should get a list of 5 course IDs. 5. And realized my hand was out of frame. So let's go test it out. I'm sure this was broken because I did a bunch of stuff for a while that had a bunch of syntax errors. So let's restart the server and come back up to the edit page. Oh, tuples. Okay. Walson, I appreciate the correction there. Yeah, I'm doing my best to like go off of API for memory, and I am a fallible human being and make mistakes. So thank you for keeping me honest. Okay, so we've got, it's not quite, the type itself is list-like, but it still sees it as a query set. So even though we called values list and it seems like it should be a list, it is something that is iterable. So we might actually want to convert that to a list. So I'm reading your question here quietly. Make sure I understand it before I try and respond. So you're trying to get your data from a query, okay? Is it possible to convert in a Django query set? I think I might be a little confused on the way you've worded the question here a little bit. Is it possible to convert? So if you could expand upon that a little bit, that would be helpful. Because I'm not quite getting what you're going for. Because I hope I showed here with this example that you can get the IDs pretty quickly from a query set. But maybe you mean something a little different. And if you do, I'm happy to think about the question if you can phrase it a little differently. So what I'm going to do is convert. So how are we going to use this thing? So we actually need to do some set math here. So I'm going to go ahead and take this query set, which should be an iterable, and I'm going to create a set out of it like this. So now we have a set of IDs to work with. I appreciate that. Yes, autocorrectors can be a funny thing, especially if, English may not be, I'm pretty sure English is not your native language, and so maybe your autocorrector is trying to translate to some stuff to Spanish or something. I have no idea. I've not had to deal with that particular challenge. Okay, so we've got our course IDs. The other thing I want to get is they are the included IDs. And now I'm thinking through this. Man, there's probably going to be some really annoying comparison stuff that happens here, because these IDs that are coming back are hash IDs. So they only kind of look like strings. So we might need to do like an iteration, a list comprehension to convert them to make comparable types. That would be stinky if that's what happens, but hey, we'll deal with that if we need to deal with that. Because I think otherwise we're not going to get our set math right. So what I'm going to do is put down all of like the set logic that I think we're going to do, and then we'll work on the persistence of a checklist if we need to. So we want the set of included the courses to keep, what the user has said, include all of these things, and if they're not in the list, exclude them. So I'm going to call this included course IDs, and this is going to come from the post data. And so now here's where we're going to walk into a list comprehension. So and we want to also strip off. Remember, I attached the course. I kind of mangled this together in my form. So we're going to want to strip off the course prefix on this as well. So we'll say, can't just use ID because that's sort of a reserve word, or it always bugs my syntax highlighter. So I'm going to do ID underscore as a way to differentiate it. And then we'll do blah blah. I see your question there. I'll get to that in one moment. Then we're going to, what is it? What we want to do, is it strip? I think you can give strip with like I think this will work. Oh, all right. I am totally unconvinced of what I need to be doing here. So let's go to the REPL. So we're going to get a string like, well, we've got something like ID, and it's going to look something like this, where foobar in this silly example is the thing that we want to capture. So if we want ID and we say strip course, is this going to do what I expect? Whoops. That's not going to do it. Whoa. Oh, that would have, oh, I'm so glad that I had an R in there. That did not do what I expected at all. Can you, what in the world? So it tried to strip all of these characters. I think what it did, wow, that would have been quite a bug. It said, here's the set of characters that you want to strip. And strip them, because I used strip and not rstrip or lstrip, it went to both sides and said, all right, that's the characters you want to strip. Let's take out all of these things. And R is in this list, so it took out the R. So I'm super thankful that I happen to pick this silly example, because that's definitely not what we want. What is the thing that I want? Substitute. Oh, man, Python string methods sometimes. I should know all of these, but I don't. I don't want to go from W3 schools. I want to go from the docs, please. Really? Fail, Google. That's bad. Surely that is a decent search syntax. So Python built-in types, I guess. And let's look for strip here. So it's in this list. It's one of these. Stir substitute? Maybe is that what I want? Like a substitute with an empty string? Or something like that? Remove. Wow. That's on the nose. Remove prefix. Okay. I think that's it. It's in new in version 3.9. Okay. And guess what? I'm on version 3.9. That's cool. Because this is how common this is. People want to do this. So fascinating. The other thing I was thinking of wasn't split. Strip. No. Maybe that's not what I wanted either. All right, let me just test this. Remove prefix. This is cool. I'm learning something new, y'all. And course. Oh, look at that. That's so neat. All right, let me get back to the questions. Blava, you asked a question here. I have found out before starting. What? Somebody's giving me a. Okay. I don't know where you heard that advice. I think it's misguided. Maybe well-intentioned, but I think misguided. And I guess for people that aren't catching the chat or able to hear the chat or read the chat right now, it's like, so Blava's got some advice to design the perfect database for a project before starting. And my word of advice is you're not going to have the perfect database. Because it's almost impossible for you to know, unless your app is so small that you can fit it all in your head, you're just not going to know. And so you have to go into it and with a mindset of, my database model is going to change as I learn more and discover more about what my application needs to be. Django is going to help you there, or any framework you choose. But since we're talking about Django would help you there in that it has a migrations system that is designed to allow your models to evolve. So you start off with what you think is the right model, and you work with it, and you're like, oh shoot, I was missing a column, or oh, I really didn't need this thing that I thought I would need. And it supports changes and evolution in your model. And that's a really powerful aspect of the Django migration system. So that's how I would think through that. How I manage my production changes to my database is with the migration system. It's what keeps, so I keep my modeling at the class definitions in Django and let the migration system handle the addition of stuff and the removal of stuff and so forth. Hopefully that answers your question. Okay, your question, Quatley. You've got a raw query type. Is it possible to convert that result in a Django query set? That is an interesting question. So it sounds to me, Koali, like you have maybe a database that is not managed by Django, and you're dealing with that. There are, I think there's a couple of approaches that that you could do there. One is Django has, I forget the command. All right, we've solved this remove prefix thing, so I think we can look at this later. I'm trying to remember the name of the command. So let's look at the management commands. I think there's one that can help you here potentially. Jeffrey, you posted the command. I'm not sure what you're referring to. The thing that I was thinking of, yeah, there's models object draw, but I think what Koali might be limited by is that if it's a table that is not managed by Django, then there is no model yet. And what I was trying to find was one of these that actually says there's a way to create a model. Inspect DB. Yeah. Thank you. You're like answering the question for me. That's one method I was thinking of. I confess I have not used Inspect DB before, but I believe what it does is it can generate a model from a table. There might be some challenges though, because like if you don't have a lot of control over the database table that you have, it might be limited of the quality of the table that it's going to produce. But I think a Django model that, like, even if it wasn't a perfect match, and you only cared about certain of the columns, you could perhaps like get rid of the ones you don't care about and have like this view into it that would allow you to have something that's queryable on the parameters that you care about. So that is the most natural advice I can think of that would allow you to get something into a query set that you could operate on. I don't remember, the part that I don't remember in this is, does Django have a way to kind of indicate that this is managed by some other system? And don't try and make a migration for it. Don't try and create the DDL, the data description language that would do a create table statement or drop columns, like especially if you don't control that database, like you don't want to go deleting somebody else's production database, right? So that's what I would check on. Maybe InspectDB already has that built in as an assumption of, well, if you're inspecting somebody's DB, then it means you definitely didn't want to create this in Django, so it is not a table that Django should own, but I don't know. So I would say take a look at the if anywhere, this seems like it would be in the Django model meta options of this is something that should be managed by Django or not. Yeah, I wish I had traveled this path more often. I think it'd be interesting to explore, but I just don't have a lot of experience in that area. But hopefully that gives you an idea of something you could try. Okay, getting back to our little problem here. We don't want strip. That was wrong. We're going to use this fancy new thing from Python 3.9. We're in the future here, folks. And we're going to take course as the prefix and take that off. And then we're going to say for ID in self data. And we don't want the keys. Actually, we do want the keys. So we'll leave it as self.data, because by the default, the iterator will get the keys. If ID starts with course, because we don't want to try and do that on the CSRF token or anything else that might happen to be in there. I think this is what we want. And I'm pretty sure I did this elsewhere. I'm super curious how I did remove IDs and stuff in the past. Ooh, look at black. That was fun. All right. I'm tempted to go see, like, how did I do this all in other times, and did I screw it up by using strip, thinking that was right, and didn't see that foobar error. I'm not going to do that, though, right now. So that would give us the set of IDs. We'll wrap it in a set. We'll transform it into that, which we don't need that to be a list, actually, now that I think about it. The fact that it's inside parentheses will make it an iterator. Okay, and not a Django managed database. Yeah. Cool. Well, give that a shot, or try something like that. I'm interested, whatever your solution you pick, like to hear back on how it went working with like non-managed Django managed data. So I'm not going to try and modify this set yet. Like I said, it's a set of hash IDs. I don't think this is going to work, but I am curious. We're going to print out the course IDs that we're getting from our stuff, which we already saw, but we'll keep it. We'll also print out the included course IDs. That's going to be the posted data. And then I want to print out, these are both sets. So now we should be able to do course IDs minus included course IDs. So that's some set math that Python will allow, which will give us the set subtraction. I don't know how else, the IDs that we want to exclude, which we'll call in a minute. And then we don't need to print out the data again because we saw that that was kind of it was a query dict that had a bunch of keys that were the course IDs with the value of on, and we don't really care about the value side. All right, so let's turn the web server back on. Let's go back over to our checklist. Click through it one more time. Actually, let's take off one of them just to see. So this should now be a list of 4. And in theory, if it's doing the comparison in magical ways that I didn't anticipate, like if it's actually able to compare the two, then we should be left with 5, 4, 1 as the things that we can see in that output. But I suspect, would you look at that, son of a gun? That's super cool. It did it. So it sees this. That must be the string. That must be the stir method representation. But when it did the set math, it coerced the hash ID into a stir for the comparison. So what we're left with is a single ID for the thing we want to exclude. Oh, that's cool. Ahmed, is that, I think that could be a way to approach this. Yes. And that might be what I've done in another place. And you can even go, yeah, that's probably something along the lines that I would have done. Because I know that I've done this somewhere else. And now that you brought it up, I'm curious enough to go be like, how else did I do this? Because there's another spot in the app where I do this kind of technique where I'm looking for IDs, and I believe it's in the core views. Is there a form? Yeah, split will create new strings, but I think that I wouldn't worry about that. Like it would be on the order of 5 new strings, and so it would be in my mind it would be a vast premature optimization to worry about the creation of a new string. But you're technically right that yes, it would create new strings. All right, I'm not going to find it right now, and I'm not going to waste our time trying to look for it. So we'll just assume that I did it right in the other spot, and maybe I'll go look offline for how it does. So we've now got the ability to get the course IDs that we want to exclude, which is awesome. Because remember, the checklist model, it needs to store. It's going to store in, whoops, that's not the file. in a JSON field, it needs to store a list of excluded courses. Now, this is where I'm going to have to like coerce this back into a type that I care about, because I can do the set math. So let's do this. We got excluded course IDs is going to be what we just saw, course IDs minus included course IDs. And so when we save when we save this with a checklist, we need to like make this in a format that's going to fit into the JSON field in the way that I expect it, or I'm implying that it is here. Because I've said, or I've implicitly had this assumption the whole time, that excluded courses will be a JSON field that is the list of string IDs. And I don't know, we can try and, yeah. So I think I want to do, what do I want to do? List around this and sorted, just to be super consistent. And that's what we're going to save into the checklist. So this, I'm looking at these to-dos. These are only real course IDs because we're doing the set math. And so it's only going to be working from this set. Anything outside of that set will be ignored. So I'm confident on that to do. Got to tickle my nose. I'm going to sneeze in a minute, but it's not ready yet. Okay. We're doing the comparison. That's just the set math. So we got that to do. So save needs to create a checklist. Save needs to do one of two things, right? It's actually not just creating a checklist. There could already be a checklist for the school year. So we want to create a checklist or update one if it doesn't exist. That's what we're really after. So we want to say, and there's a method for that, and I always get messed up by the syntax, so we're going to go look at it. And it is I even sort of forget the name. I think it's create or update. Create or update. Nope. Something or update. Rats. No. That's not it. It's essentially an upsert, if you're familiar with that concept. Maybe that alone will get me the right method name. Django update or create. There it is. It was close. Not create or update. Update or create. Of course. And it shows you effectively what it's trying to do. Does it get, save some stuff, or else? The thing that I always get wrong is like which of these to set. I think we want to set defaults. Well, let me read this. Update or create method tries to fetch an object from the database based on the given keyword args. If a match is found, it updates the fields passed in the defaults dictionary. This is like getting all right, so we've got update or create. It's saying get John Lennon, and if you find it, change the first name to Bob. So you'd be left with an instance that is Bob Lennon. So based on this, I think the thing we want to search for, all right, so I think we have enough there. We want to, and again, I might push this into a method, but for now, we'll just do it this way. Checklist objects. So we're after, we're going to use update or create. The thing that we want to update is a checklist associated with the school year. So if we are going to get a school year, or we have a school year instance from that, and yeah, defaults defaults is where the update data. So then we want to say, so if you can find a school year object, update. Wow, why is it doing it that indent there? That's weird. Update the defaults and put excluded courses set to the excluded course IDs. All right, so now we want to import the checklist model. And again, I think this method is really cool, but I don't know, maybe I'm just daft sometimes. But the interface to this is always a little clumsy to me, because I can't remember if it's like, if this is the part that's doing the updating, or if it's I never remember this defaults key. I just don't do that enough. I think this is it, with any luck. So let's go back and let's try it out. See if it actually creates a checklist object. So let's go, before we actually go through this process, let's go to this area, let's go to the teacher's app and look at the checklists. And there are 0 checklists in this table currently. I'm going to edit this. We're going to, let's take out, I love science, but we're going to take it out in the name of science. Do some actual scientific testing here. I don't know. We're going to save it. Oh, that's what I was afraid of. Okay. So we got to do a little bit more massaging of this data to make it right, because hash IDs are not serializable. So it doesn't know what to do with a hash ID. So we want to take the easiest way I can think to fix this is it's already a sorted list of hash IDs. And so now let's just take the stir of the course ID. I don't feel super good about the way I'm doing this, but I think this will work. And do that. So what it's going to do, so this was a hash ID, and we're going to convert it to a string. A string is serializable, which means a string can be transformed into data that will be stored as JSON data, because all JSON data is just a bunch of strings put together into one big string. So that should get us what we want to avoid that error. Okay. Now let's go back. I'm going to do the same test, leave off science. Ooh, it even worked on the output. Oh, that's cool. So notice science is no longer on the list here. It's gone, which is exactly what we want, right? So almost don't even need to go over to the admin to prove that it worked the way we expected it to, but let's do it anyway. Let's refresh this page. Now we see this ID. The admin's not the most useful interface here, but it's useful enough for this local set of data. So if we expand this, we see that it's storing the school year ID, and we're seeing that it's storing this here. Now, the next thing to check is, can we update this, and will it update the way that we think it should? I'm going to come here. Ooh, wow. All right. Didn't see that coming, but that's what it's doing. All right. Stinker. Edit the checklist. We don't need to filter this. This was filtered. I copied this from the other view. This is where this was not a good thing. There's no reason to, we actually don't want to filter this. We specifically want all of the classes that are there, whether they're part of the checklist or not. So let's take out that filter. There's science. It's unchecked. So we could switch this. We should be able to say, let's pick art, turn science back on, let's turn math back off. We're just going to make a few changes here. So now the result is there should be 2 IDs in the excluded list, and it should show up here. So science is there now, math is gone, and art is the other one that's missing. Now I can illustrate I can properly illustrate the problem. Let's turn all these back on. I'm going to uncheck just one piano. What you're going to see is when we get to the next screen, piano is still going to be there. So here's piano, here's piano. And then if we click this, it's going to be checked again. It's like we didn't do it. So we'd have to uncheck both of these since they are the same course. Only then is it actually going to turn it off. And then we can turn it back on with one. Okay. I think the feature is like, it's done. It's done in that it works. It's not done to a satisfying level. There's plenty of cleanup that we should do, and then test to write and all this sort of stuff. So let's do a little bit of that. Kind of put a bow on this, and then maybe we'll start on. Maybe that'll be the end of this particular thing, and then I'll go through. The part that you all don't see that I do afterwards is for some of these features. Like I'm not. This is the only time that I'm working on this project, so I'm not cranking out features constantly. So I try and keep my users apprised of changes to the application so that they're available, that, hey, I'm still working on this. There's still something new. It's just a slower pace of things. So what I do outside of the streams, because it's not super exciting and it's really hard to think about writing as I'm trying to communicate to you all constantly, is exactly that. It's writing. So I will write up some documentation that I've got for this. And then I will also make like a product blog post, kind of like, here's the feature, here's how it works. And then I have a feature in my app that does kind of an in-app notification. They get a little gift, a little icon that has a gift thing that says new or something along those lines that appears right here in-app, so that they can click it and it takes them to the blog post that they can read about the actual product update. So those are the things that after we've gone through this one of these cycles where we worked on a feature for a while, that's the stuff that I don't do behind, that I do, but I do it behind the scenes. So you don't really see that. But we're not quite there yet. We got to come back through here and think, is this the way it should be? So I'm content with, I think this worked exactly how I expected it to. I was speculating that this is the right way to check that, but that was right. It worked. So I think the template is all done. And this, we wrap this up in a method. Yeah, probably. So the input parameter should be the excluded course IDs, like this cleaning stuff that's in here, that should move into the model. So that's a pretty easy thing to extract. Let's go to the models, and we'll say this will be a class method. It's gonna have to take the school year. Class method. Update. That's what we're doing. Class, school year, school year. The nice part about doing this as well is that I don't want to have the form know how it has to clean the data for the way that the model wants to store its own internal excluded courses list. Like this line right here is particularly a gross amount of knowledge that this form has over the checklist model. So that's not cool. So I'm going to assume that what gets passed to this method is just a list of strings, and then I will be doing the work to ensure that that is the case. So we'll say excluded courses, and that will be a list of stir. And that's not going to like that probably, because it knows that it's going to be a list of hash IDs. Interesting. And it's not going to return anything. Create or update a list, a checklist for the school year. That's what this thing is going to do. So now, even the sorted aspect, like that's not really responsibility of this form. It should just be able to pass in a list of IDs, and that should be enough. And any cleanup that the method does should be handled there. So what I'm going to do is take this chunk of code and paste it over here and change that to class, because it's a class method. I'm going to pass in the school year like that. It's now an argument, or a parameter, I guess, on this side, and excluded courses. And so here's where we're cleaning this up. Here's where we can also say sorted on this. So that's all the cleanup. Like it's really doing the sanitization of the input data. It's assuming you're going to get a list of stir. Now, I think this is where MyPy is going to blow up in my face and say, you cannot do this. So we're going to do checklist update school year. Oops, that has to be self school year. And excluded course IDs. Let's see if it catches this. This is surprising. Maybe. Oh, you know what it is? I bet MyPy doesn't know how to evaluate the return of values list, so it looks like an any. So it doesn't know that it's a list of hash IDs. We're just sort of declaring that this is our intent here, but MyPy can't figure that out. Let's just try and run MyPy explicitly in case I'm speaking out of turn. Yeah, pretty sure MyPy can't figure it out. That's okay. Okay, so now we're left, we've got the list interface and we're passing it in, and we're kind of hands off after that. The form is knowledgeable about the attributes that are coming from the template. That's kind of unavoidable in the way this is designed, but that's okay. The other thing, we have this from school year thing that felt pretty good. So that was the method that we want. It was a return to query set. So I'm happy with this. I think I'm happy with how the form turned out. We do need a test to do. Test the form. We'll do that in a little bit. And I don't know that I need to have explicit tests for this if I'm going to be testing the form. Form is going to be testing this at a bit of a distance, but I think that's okay. It's going to test this method. Nope, it's not going to test this for school year method. That's in the view. Okay. Now let's look at these two views with an eye for duplication, like I said I would. And remember, or maybe if you weren't here last week, something I said last week is like, when you're thinking about refactoring, I said consider once, twice refactor. And the reason for that is like sometimes code may look similar, but it's just similar in shape. It's not actually similar in purpose. And where one of the areas that I see this is like, think about this area. We saw just a moment ago that the edit view initially failed because it was hiding the science thing, which was unchecked. And that's because I had this filter schedules erroneously in here. And so if I had pulled this schedules calculation piece out into a function that was helping, then I would have had to add like a Boolean logic of saying filter or not filter. And by the time you do that, you're adding more code and it doesn't really feel like it's worth it. So in this case, I think it makes sense to leave this block as it is and this block as it is and not try and extract that. All right, so then back it up. What do we actually do we care about? This stuff is this stuff used in different ways. So this week, So the problem is that some of this preamble, it seems like it might be only used in one spot, but it's actually not. This week variable here is used by this line and it's used by this line. So it's needed for multiple contexts. And similarly, weekday. So all I could really pull out of here, maybe if I wanted to, is this calculation of the weekday. That is a little bit of duplication that truly is not unique to each of these views and could be pulled out, but is it worth it? Like, there's only two views here. And so I think this is where my gut's telling me there's only two views. Don't worry about it, because if it becomes a third view, then once, twice refactor kicks in, and then it starts to have material value where it's like there's enough duplication that if I was to leave it and have to update it, then I'd have to update it in like 3, 4, 5 spots. But having just two is not enough of a friction to really want to do that. All right, this section, this section is definitely unique to this view. There's nothing to extract there. It's a common pattern with request method post, and then it has the form creation, the is valid check, the save, and then the redirect, which we do need to test. The context looks okay here and above. So I'm feeling pretty good about those views. Let's run the suite and see how much stuff is uncovered. I have a feeling like basically this whole feature is uncovered. All the tests should pass, but there's going to be a bunch of stuff that's not covered. Yeah, so this new model method that we added, the form view, and the teacher view. Okay, about what I anticipated. And holy smokes, this suite passes so much faster than it used to. Previously on the stream itself would be causing so much. Prior to a couple weeks ago, all of my streaming was done with a 2014 MacBook Pro that I had from my last job, where I was working as a contractor, so they paid for my machine, and I got to keep the machine after I left that job. And it's been my workhorse machine for all of my side projects for many, many years. And so it was doing its darndest to keep up, but it was, again, 2014. Even though it was a great machine at the time, it was starting to show its age. So running this thing that I just ran, it would, on stream with the fans going and everything, it would take like 30 seconds to run the whole suite. And it just did that on this new machine in 6 seconds. So that's cool. Maybe you all don't care, but I guess it means I get to go a little faster, assuming that I'm not doing the meta-analysis and talking about it. All right, so let's get this coverage number up. Where do we want to start? I think that maybe the easiest spot to start that's going to have the most bang for our buck is probably the forms itself. Do a forms test, and then we can come back and fill in the gaps. There's going to be a little bit, a couple of view tests that we need to write, so on and so on. So let's create a new file. I'm sure we don't have a forms class. Oh, yep, don't have a forms class. Test forms pi from homeschool test import test case. And this is the checklist form test. No, that's not how I write these. Test checklist form, which is going to derive from the test case. We want to check. What do we want to check? So it has a save method. I think that's all we really care about. And it's going to be pulling that from the data even, so we don't even have to, get very advanced with this. So I can think of, off the top of my head, a couple of different core paths that it has to generate. Test creates checklist, right? So that's one case we care about. A checklist is created on save. The other is the update. I want to make sure that there are not multiple checklists created. That would be annoying. A checklist is updated. An existing checklist. Why the doc strings? Doc strings are there because Matt from 6 months from now will not remember what I was doing here. And that sounds silly because these seem pretty obvious, but I have looked back at old tests and like, what is this test doing? Because some of these tests can get a little involved. And, shockingly, I don't know, maybe I'm just getting older, but my brain needs a little help here and there. So having a sentence or two that kind of guides me is why I do that. So we need a form. In order to build a form, we need a school year object. So we're going to need the school year. And that's coming from homeschool, schools, tests, factories, import the school year factory. School year factory. And we'll want a school year and the school year factory like so. We want to check our form and do come on, Matt. Form is going to take, it needs to take two things. It's going to take data, which we don't have yet, so we'll define that in a minute, and the school year. Those are the two bits that need to be processed with this. We'll need the actual form. So form homeschool teachers forms import checklist form. So there's that. And then we want to save this thing. And then we want to assert that there is a checklist. And remember, the checklist is going to show up as a reverse relationship on the school year as well. So we should be able to do school year checklists, which was the reverse name that we gave on it, count is equal to 1. And after that, well, we should probably assert that it has the data in it that we want to put in it. Trying to think of how deep I want to make this test. Because we could assert, this is the test that we could use to say, all right, this course is going to be excluded. So, yeah, there's an easy way to get to that too. We want to have a course factory as well. And I always forget how to make a course with it takes it from a grade level. Okay. To get everything we need a grade level factory. It's one of the aspects that I don't like about this particular app is the amount of factories that I sometimes need for these tests. But stuff has complex relationships at times. Not a lot you can do about it. So we've got our course factory. And now time to populate it. So we need a grade level. And we're going to say the grade level factory takes a school year as an argument. Whoops. What are you doing, Matt? School year, school year. Forget that. We don't need the school year factory. Go on overkill with this test. Instead, we'll delete that stuff and say grade level school year. Now, we do need a course. So the course is going to be the course factory, which will take grade levels equal to a list that has grade level. And this is the weird stuff that we have to do because of that many-to-many field. Factory Boy, the package that I'm using for generating factories, doesn't do a great job with many-to-many fields, at least in my experience. Maybe there are better ways to handle it and I just haven't figured that out, but that's been my experience so far. Okay. The data. So this thing right here, the data is the data that is like the post data, as if we had submitted that form. And I'm leaving this empty. And the intent of leaving it empty is to behave as if the user had unchecked the box. So what the form that data that's being sent is actually an empty list. It's going to include a CSRF token, but I'm going to pretend that doesn't exist. So it's not really a concern of this unit test. The reason to do that is now we have a course that is associated with a particular grade level, and we are passing in this school year. And by saying we didn't pass that in the post data is kind of implying that the user wanted that to be excluded. So that gives us something else that we can assert on. So we can say grade level dot school year checklists count equal 1. And then the second thing that we're going to do is actually look into that checklist and make sure that this course ID shows up on that list. Because if you think back to the form logic over here, or actually you can just see the form logic over here, the course IDs, we're going to get that from the school year, and then it's going to look for what's still being included, and then it's going to do the subtraction, and it's going to be left with one course ID. So we should have a checklist that has this course on it. Hopefully that made some sense. So I'm going to run this test with any luck. Oops. Oh, yeah. Can't invoke it this way. I have to invoke it with school year. It's a keyword only argument. Okay. So it passed. It created a checklist. So we know that that worked, which I expected it to. And now we can actually look at that. So let's get out the checklist. So we'll do checklist equal grade level school year checklists. First should be only 1, so that should give us something. And then we can assert that the checklist excluded courses is equal to a list that is the stir with the course ID. That should be true. Great. All right. Now, we want to do the same thing, except we want to have we just want to have an existing checklist on here. And then we're just at that point testing the fact that we used update or create rather than just a create. So all of this stuff repeats. I don't need to check the count anymore. I'm pretty confident that that's the right thing. And then I want to do here, I want to do checklist equals checklist factory. So I'm pretty sure I have a checklist factory. And we want to give it the school, we want to make sure it matches for the school year already. So that's going to be school year, grade level school year. Got to import that factory, which comes from homeschool teachers, tests factories, import checklist factory. Now we have a checklist. This time down here, we're going to say refresh from DB. So that's telling the instance, like when we fetched it here and got it from the factory, the instance should have had, well, let me show the factory. It'll make more sense. So here's the factory. All it creates is the school year, which means that it's relying on the model's default to populate the excluded courses field. So the factory instance that we just created will have an empty excluded courses field. It'll be an empty list. But we're going to refresh from the database here, and if save did its job, then it would have stored, just like before, it would have stored that course ID into there and then populate this. So I think that this should be correct. And it is. All right. Now, there needs to be there probably needs to be one test that is actually testing this course prefix behavior. Because if we don't have anything to test, if there's nothing to test that that course prefix is there, then all we've really done is assume that the user's never going to send any checkboxes, which isn't the truth. It's pretty uninteresting to have this empty data dictionary. So we really need to check that. So I want to say a similar setup. So we'll have a test that says test includes course. And we'll say a course is not excluded. That's a no. A course is included for display. The logic on that assert is going to look weird, but I'll be able to read the doc string and say, okay, that's what it was about. So let's take all of this stuff from this test and let's make the thing that we actually care about. And that is going to look like, we're going to use this course still. We're going to have, we don't care about that one assert. We're going to know that that works. We expect on the other side of this to have this be an empty list. That's going to be the difference. And it's going to fail right now because it has an ID in there, because we haven't passed anything into this data. So here's what we're going to do. We'll do an F string for the key that is course dash course, not source, course ID. And then the other side of that is going to be the string of on. We don't really care about the value so much, but this is what a browser will send, is that string of on. And I had too much there, so okay. So now we have a data dictionary here. And now since this is included, going through that logic again, it's going to show up in this and keep this. It's going to be in the included course IDs. And that means that the subtraction in this step is going to end up with an empty list here. And so what should happen on the other side is that the checklist should be an empty list. And it is. Okay. Let's go back and check our coverage again after doing that work. And I think it's going to knock out maybe all the model stuff or most of it, and then certainly the form stuff. Yep. All right. So we've knocked out the teacher's form thing completely. We knocked out the course models one. Did we query courses there? Oh yeah, we did from school year right here. That's in the save. So we knocked out that completely. And then we're left with a couple lines here and there. So I like to, so why did I do it this way? There are a couple of ways you could have done this. With testing, we could have started at the view and done a lot of the same kind of testing and passed in a bunch of view data and dealt with the client. But form tests are smoking fast compared to a view test. Like that, we can run this in very little time. Now, this still is a fast machine, and this test suite is pretty speedy. But a view test naturally takes more to process. And so if we can shave, as you're building up your test suite, especially if you're being really rigorous about testing, you're going to have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tests. So it really matters to try and keep the speed of those pretty quick, because you want to be able to ideally run the whole suite without concern, like I've shown a couple times. And the form tests are going to just naturally be faster. They're only running. They're creating an object. They're doing a save, so they are doing a little bit of database stuff. But the database is fairly quick in this setup because it's all using an in-memory database. But they allow us to check out most of the logic of this unit without having to test it through the view. We could test it through the view, but if you're doing that, at that point, to actually go down that path, you're doing a client post, you're exercising all of the middleware, you're just running a lot more code just to test this small little section here with this save method. So that's why I started with the form test, and then we can go back and now test out the edit view itself. And I think testing out the edit view, because of what the edit view is doing, that's going to probably knock out that model method that we added. We're going to have to deal with this. We'll have to add a specific test, because that line's not covered. But somewhere, this checklist for school year thing, I think will be knocked out by testing the view. So let's do that. We want to do, well, I'll sketch them out. Test, edit, checklist. That's the view that we're working on. And we want a few tests. Now, I did not use my authorization system because there were some specific stuff that we had to filter against here. So this tells me that I should do, because I left this open with this any authorized authorizer, I should have a test for authorization. So test authorization. I'll just be really explicit with what I want to do. Yeah. A user must be the admin of the school. All right, we'll see that in a minute. So that's one test. That's the authorization check. Always want to have that one. The other one that I want to test is I want to test this edit page serves multiple purposes. It's serving both a display page, the form that they actually get presented. So that's the get path, test get. So we want to see that we can get an OK response. The edit form is displayed. We want to test the post. And in fact, I don't ever call this test get OK. I usually just call it test get. Test post. We've already checked that the form is creating the checklist object, so I don't need to check that again. What I really care about is can we submit something and get to the place we intend to be? So the user needs to be sent back to the checklist view. So that's what we need to check on. The user returns to the checklist view. That's the test. That's the success case. And then test no school. No school year. That's the 404 line. That's like, this is the one that's picky. When no school year is found, return not found. Bit redundant, but again, these messages are there to help me later, and I think they will. Sometimes they jog my brain in different ways than reading test method names. Okay, so first test, we're going to let's use this stuff because it's a lot of the same kind of thing. The difference is if I take out the user part and leave it like that, this should fail. It should not give me a 200. But it did. So that's troublesome. It means that there's some access control that I'm possibly missing. I thought that that this would return some kind of error, that get year for would have a failure, but that's clearly not what happened. We logged in and we checked a school year, and it's somebody else's school year. No, it's not. This is the challenge with this. So this is going to return an empty response. It's not a bad thing for that user. It's just there's nothing to see. But it's not going to return a 404. Right? This will return well, hold on. Let me check myself. Why? Oh. I know what I'm doing. Still checking the checklist. The edit checklist. Okay. It did do what I expected it to. So we want the response. We want to do a get. And then we want to do assert response status code equal 404. Okay. Yeah, maybe you didn't see it, I went too quickly. Let's do it again. So remember those form tests, all three of them were passing in 0.27 seconds. One test here, because it had to load up all the view machinery, took half a second to run. Now I think that view machinery loads once the first time because it has to load all the URLs. So there's probably a cost that if I run multiple view tests in a row, it doesn't have to do that a lot. But it was still just in isolation a cost. So we've got this proof that 404 works. In fact, I think that might knock out this test. We know. I don't think we have to test that. Let me make sure. Whoops, wrong one. Make fast coverage. (46 through 63). Yep. So we're from here down. And there's still that models thing, which will be hit once it gets to this context line. All right, cool. So if we check the post and then we check the get, then we'll get all those lines. So let's steal this again. Oops. And we want to get check 200. This time it is for that user, so it should find a real school year. And then I want to assert a handful of things. I want to assert these things are both in there. And then I want to assert that the checklist is also in the context, even though it's none. Maybe because it's returning a none value, it is not evaluating to true. Okay, let's change the assert checklist in self get context. Come on. That doesn't work either. Let's do self get context checklist. Let's be explicit that we expect it to be none. You're none. It throws an error before that gets that far. Okay. Well, that's really annoying. I don't know how to get to that value to assert that it's none. Self assert context assert context, I guess. Assert context checklist with none. What are you doing? Oh, did it again. It's too late, y'all. It's I'm going against the wrong view. No wonder all those things didn't work. Checklist really wasn't there. All right, I really don't like that style. So let's see if I can get away with this cleaner style. Self assert checklist. Yeah, I didn't. Shoot. Assert self get context checklist is none. Okay. So that's cool. That's done. Then we want to do the post. It's like the last thing. And then we probably, thinking more about this, I think I actually want this to be have a value, because the only way that we're going to actually test this for school year thing directly is if we have a value here. So I'm changing my mind here after all that. So checklist, factory, school year equal school year. And then we need from homeschool, teachers, tests, factories, import, checklist factory. And we want to say equal to checklist. All right, great. So close. Now, last setup. This time I'm going to copy from this one, which actually has the edit. We don't care. I don't care this time about a checklist. I do care that it's going to be a response, and instead of a get check, we're going to do a post. That's all good. And then I always forget how to do this post data. I know I've done it in other places. Let's search for self post data. Okay. So at the end, data equal data. And we don't really care about that form. We've already tested the form, remember? So we can pass it with empty stuff. That's fine. And then at the end, what we want to do is we want to assert the response location. The location is going to be the thing that it's a redirect. So there's two things we want to assert. We want to assert that this is a redirect. So response status code of 302, I think. It's 302 or 301. And then we want the location to be reverse on teacher's checklist with the same values as above. So 20, 22, 6, 15. That test passes. All right, I'm hopeful that we got 100% of the lines. Let's try it out. Glorious. Very cool. Wow. Oh, thanks, blah blah. I'm glad Django Riffs is helping you out. I appreciate the nudge. Like, I've been super delinquent about making new episodes. I don't think I've released a new episode since like March. I even have. It's not on this computer, but I have a draft of the show notes. So what I do is I take my Understand Django articles currently, and I adapt them to be what I'm going to talk about for the stream. So the podcast pairs along with my Understand Django series, and so I wrote up all the notes. And I'm ready to go, and just haven't sat down and actually recorded the darn thing. There's some sort of inertia that gets me, that makes it a hard problem to do. I think it's probably because I tend to record on the weekends, and weekends are like, man, that's like family time typically. So it's hard to be motivated about that. Oh, okay. Cool, Jeffrey. Glad you found Django Riffs. Yeah, I think it's a good resource that I should invest more in, as I think it's helpful for people who, going to work, driving to work, and want to listen to something and learn something. I think it would be good for that. I have a vision of what I want that to be ultimately. So at some point, I will end the like series of here's all about the core of Django, and then it becomes what next after that. And I think that's where there's a real potential. I want to start getting into talking about different packages in the Django ecosystem. The ecosystem is rich and full of so many features, and there's so much to cover. So I want to get through that core that follows along with my blog series. And once I finish that, then I can start talking about the extra stuff and stuff. So that's the vision, but I got to get back to it. All right, let's put a bow on this, get through here, figure out what we did. Whoops. I'm already seeing a to-do that I left in there. Okay. Let's go over there. I'm out of gas, y'all, so my willpower is low at this point. So we're gonna see me cutting some corners because I can. So this is one of those things where, as I said earlier in the stream, it would be good to wrap this up in a method because this is kind of private state. Sort of don't care though. This is such a simple line. Blah blah. I appreciate that. Thank you for the contribution. That's awesome. This is one of those things where, yes, I could make this better, but I'm going to say not tonight. So the benefit of being the owner of a project is you can look at a to-do and you just say, no thanks, done. So knocking that one out. All right, let's take another look. All right, so we've got our course, our new method that we use this. We use this to get the courses from the school year. We talked about distinct, talked about what that did and why it was needed for a many-to-many field, and some of the pain and joy that comes with using many-to-many fields. Then we spent a bunch of time. I mean, this is one of those times where I am pleased that the code is this short, but looking at we spent 2 hours basically. No, and I know we did more than this, but getting this kind of stuff going, that was really a lot of what we talked about. But to get there, there's helper methods, and we talked about values list, and we looked at new syntax and Python. So there's a bunch of stuff that's there that's kind of cool that I'm glad I got to talk through it. And then we added another method here to actually do it. So the form ends up being pretty clean looking. And continuing on, we've got our new methods that we added to our models. The nice part about adding these to the models too, and the reason for having this concept of fat models is that the next time I want to use these things, the next time I want to do get a checklist for a school year, I can just use the method rather than having to think about doing the filter and doing the, all of that stuff. So it does add some benefit over the long run. We talked about annotations as well and the benefit of using future annotations. So there's something there. Then we came through and added the test code coverage. We tested these forms, tested the main cases, tested the views as well. And then I talked about, with my authorization system, a lot of the times I don't need this test unless I use an authorizer that is explicitly like saying allow anything. Then that gives me some prompting to say like, you probably need some kind of authorization check to make sure that your view is actually doing authorization. That's why we added that one. And then we tested the basic paths of getting and posting. The URLs, this is from the last stream where we hooked all this stuff up. And we hooked up, this is the whole complete edit checklist view, doing everything it needs to do. And then finally, this is the edit checklist button that we added. And I could put that behind a feature flag, but I don't feel like it. I'm confident enough in this feature that I don't feel the need to do that. But if I wanted to be super safe about it, I could put it on a feature flag so that I could deploy this, test it out, and then if it didn't work right, I could roll it back. But I'm very confident in the change that we've made. So we got our new form. This is the whole thing. It loops over the schedules, loops over the courses. And that's it, y'all. All right, cool. So I'm going to commit this, and we'll say complete checklist editing feature. And this is number 610. All right. So fixes number 610. Push that up. I will deploy this. Actually, I'm gonna reopen this because there's some stuff here that I need to address that I'm not gonna bother showing on stream as I mentioned, but I'm gonna record it now. So we need documentation. So this is not just like documentation for me too. This is not technical stuff. This is user documentation. I have a documentation site. Users should know that that feature is available. Announcement, post, announcement, blog post, and the actual announcement notification. Yes, Jeffrey, I do manage features by GitHub. So you can see everything that I plan to do with this app, and I even mark them. Some of these things get reported by my customers. One of them, my primary customer, is my wife, who she can just say, do this. In fact, we closed it, but on here, there it is. Here's my spouse. So she created a GitHub account and joined GitHub just to write an issue for me. I don't know if it's a joke or if she actually plans on using it, but my wife is now a contributor on the homeschool application that she uses. Do the issues match to the to-dos? No, they don't. How many to-dos do I have left? I say that. It is quite the honeydew list. That's very good, sir. Here is an example. So I try to avoid to-dos. To-dos for me are things that I'm like working on in a feature branch. I try not to commit them to the repository. That doesn't always work. And where I do have to-dos, I have an associated issue. So you can see this goes along with 495, really, a lot of issues. So this was like maybe I closed, that's the closed ones. There's an open bug, 495 of, it seems like I left something in the code and I'm like, what is this? But it's in like this really complex scheduling logic that I have. So I have to go, it's going to take my brain a while to get that all in my head. All right, so that's the feature for tonight. That's where I'll wrap it up. Next next stream, which I think should be next Wednesday. I don't know of anything on my schedule that would prevent that. I think what we're going to do is try out this this piece of software right here. So I already use Flake8 to do all my checking, and Flake8 Bugbear is an additional set of checks to add additional quality checks on my software. I'm curious to see if I pass or if I'm failing, and then if I am failing and it's an insurmountable amount of work to do in a single stream, I will attempt to show you how do you progressively add code checks where you want stuff to be always passing. And that's something that I've done many times on much larger projects than this one, and it's a good technique to have in your pocket. So that is where I'll end it for the evening. Thank you all for joining in. It's been fun. I appreciate the discussion. It's been a lively chat for tonight, and I hope you learn something new along the way. Take care.